Nona. I'm an MPN patient diagnosed originally in 1991 and co-chair of MPN Voice. We are very well aware that we've not been able to meet you all face to face over the last couple of years at the forums, and we're very, very hopeful that we'll be getting going again this year, fingers crossed. In the meantime, we've decided to do a project of some monthly vlogcasts so that you can visually see and hear a story from a patient. And I am absolutely delighted to welcome Alice, who is my first guest on this vlogcast. And Alice, as you know or may not know, has started writing a blog that is on our website with a lot of useful information for younger patients, particularly who've been diagnosed with an MPN. Welcome, Alice, and thanks a million for agreeing to do this. Would you like to just tell me how you came to be diagnosed with an MPN? What were your symptoms?
Sure, we'll just say thank you so much, Nona, for having me. It's a real pleasure to try and kickstart your new project. My main symptom was migraine with aura, which I've had since I was 9 years old, so I can't really remember a time when I've not had them. And they plagued me all through school. You know, I had them in the classroom, on the side of hockey pitches, in the dining hall, and it was sort of escalating as I went towards my A-levels and university. And we were fully immersed in the migraine community before the MPN community. And although it was a big challenge, I went off to university and saw a new GP after I couldn't get to the top of the stairs to reach my lecture theatre. So our 9 a.m. lecture had been put at the top of 3 flights of stairs. There was no lift, and I couldn't get to the top without intense pounding in my eyes. I was really thirsty, and I'd get to the top and I'd immediately get an aura, so losing my sight in one eye. And it was at that point where I went to the GP, I described all my symptoms, said, look, I can't do any sport anymore, I can't run. They've taken over my life, really, and that of my family. And he took one look at me and said, Alice, this isn't right, and did full blood count, which picked up the elevated platelets. And looking back now, they appeared on my blood test previously, but no one had acted on the elevated platelets. So it was going to university, which was the greatest thing in the end.
So it sounds like you were probably suffering from an MPN from a very early age in your life.
Yeah, I think so. Sort of from age 9 was when I started to get migraine with aura. And the reason why I know they're driven by the MPN is because as soon as I was put on clopidogrel, which is an aspirin equivalent, they stopped completely. So I went from having multiple migraine attacks, sometimes a week, to nothing at all. So it was really life-changing.
Mm-hmm. Tell me about your initial appointment at the hematologist. I mean, how did it feel when you were told you had a myeloproliferative neoplasm or blood cancer?
Yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget that first appointment. I can still picture it now in my mind, sitting there. And I was waiting outside with my parents, and the first hematologist who I saw came out and said, you're my most complicated case of the day. And that was kind of an anonymous start to the appointment. And they just were very blunt, said, you've got a rare type of blood cancer. And I remember the room kind of spinning, and they asked my mum, did we have any history of cancer in the family? And so my mum had to go through all the different cancers that my grandparents had had, and to be discussed in that context was really scary. And then I remember asking, you know, does this have anything to do with my migraines? Because that was the reason I had ended up in that hematology consultation. And the answer we then received was no. So it was kind of doubly crushing to be told that it was unlikely to provide an answer to the thing that was plaguing my life the most. And this was all happening the day after my 21st birthday. So it's not something you ever want to be told, but the day before Christmas Eve and the day after my 21st birthday, it was really hard.
It sounds like it was really, really hard. And also sort of going back with all those disabling symptoms that you had when you're young and you've got loads of friends around you. What did the impact of your diagnosis actually have on your family and your friends?
It had a huge impact on my family. I mean, my parents are still very involved in all of my consultations now, but I remember it was very, very traumatic at the time. And I cried all the way home. And I don't think my parents had many answers. There was so much uncertainty at that stage about which MPN I had and the future hold and what was I likely to be able to do. In terms of my friends, I didn't tell them until just recently in the pandemic. So it's difficult for me to say at the time what impact it had outside my family because I kept it sort of quiet and to ourselves.
Gosh, how have you adjusted to living with an MPN, Alice? What adjustments have you had to make?
Well, looking back, I made so many adjustments to try and manage my migraines, and in hindsight, they've proved very beneficial for my MPN. So I'm thinking about eating healthily, going to bed at a regular clockwork time to try and get as much sleep as possible, practice yoga, all those things that I did to try and prevent a migraine attack, I think have really helped my MPN. So I haven't had a huge adjustment in sort of terms of lifestyle, but psychologically, I think it does take a long time. I don't know if you ever come to terms with it completely, but there's a huge adjustment, to think of yourself in those terms of having an MPN, which I think can be difficult, but it's kind of an ongoing process and it changes over the course of your journey.
I can completely empathize with that, having had one for 30 years. And I think the biggest challenge is to not allow it to dominate your life and to actually respect it, but just, not think too much about it. But sometimes it's really difficult to do that because some people have horrendous symptoms, fatigue or itch and it must be very difficult. And I often think I've been very lucky.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Do you have any other tips as sort of for young people, particularly in managing the transition into knowing you've got a chronic illness?
Yeah, I think for me, as you just said, Nona, living as much in the present and living day to day and trying to, if you have concerns, share them with family and friends and saying, this is really worrying me today. Can I just have a quick chat about it? I also like to put things in the diary that I can look forward to. So having a few things in the calendar that you can really look forward to is really helpful for me. I think also just trying to be as open about it as possible with people. I know I hadn't told people prior to the pandemic, but it's interesting now that I have told my friends. It feels like a huge weight is off your shoulder, and it can be quite hard to sort of downplay it. It's a chronic thing. I'll always live with it. It's not acute, so don't worry about it. But as you say, the symptoms can be disabling. And so trying to share that and be in a space where you can obviously be in confidence with your friends, but also so they can check in and see how you are. I think that's really important because I think hiding it can be very difficult.
Yeah. How often do you see a hematologist now?
I haven't seen one in person for over 2 years due to the pandemic, but I used to have 6 monthly appointments, but now I speak over the phone every 3 months.
And what are your top tips for approaching a hematology consultation?
Top tips, I would say I have an MPN notebook where if I come across something that's interesting or I have a question, I jot it down in this notebook. And then the night before your consultation, I look through this notebook and think, okay, what are my 3 or 4 key questions? that I'd like to ask, and taking that along with you if it's an in-person appointment, and having a bit of an agenda that you can run through with your consultant, I think is really helpful. And also having your blood test table. I don't know about you, Nona, but I compile all my results into this one big table so I can see the different trends, or if there's a number that I don't understand or a measurement, you know, I can have that in front of me in the appointment and just query it. So trying to be as prepared as possible is really important. Also, I would say not getting your expectations up too much. You know, there's no easy answers sometimes and no quick fixes. So having realistic expectations about what can come out of that single appointment, I think, has been something I've come to learn over time.
Do you have somebody with you? Because sometimes when we go to a consultation, you know, we're so a bit sort of stressed about that. You don't always hear necessarily what's being said. Do you think it's a good idea to have somebody with you to have a second pair of ears?
Yeah, absolutely. If you can take someone along with you, I think it's so important that they can, as you say, Nona, pick up on something that maybe you just zoned out from. So my parents always come with me to my appointments, and it's helpful. We can then discuss on the way home, you know, if there was something we didn't quite understand, someone else has picked it up and you can cobble it all together.
And tell me, Alice, and finally, then my last question, what are your top tips for accessing support? Because clearly you've had quite a journey, and, you know, this has been around, this being unwell has been around from a very early age, and you're now diagnosed with an MPN. So what are your tips to anybody young, or anybody actually who is newly diagnosed, for accessing support?
Well, the first thing I would say is MPN Voice has been a huge source of support for me. I met my unofficial young patient buddy at the first MPN Voice patient forum that I attended. And Gabor's his name, and I wrote one of my blogs about him and our relationship. You know, it's fantastic to be able to just drop him a WhatsApp message and say, oh, I'm a bit worried about this, or did you see that press release, and have someone to talk to who is a similar young patient with an MPN. Because I think when you're diagnosed, you're such a minority, even more so when you're a young person with an MPN. And so having someone who's going through the same experiences as you are and the same journey is so valuable. So getting involved with MPN Voice, whether that be the patient forums where you can hear both from clinicians and from other patients, also the buddy system, and where you can be paired up with another patient, has been hugely valuable for me. And then the other thing I would say is, at my hospital, there's a teenage and young adult clinic, which has been a great source of support for me. So I have a hematology nurse who I can just drop a text to at any time if I have a question or issue. And through that system, I've been able to access a dietitian and a psychologist. And so they have so much experience of caring for young patients that they're sort of on the same page as you. And I'm aware that that service won't be available at all centres, but just reaching out and expressing to your consultant if you have an issue. At the end of the day, you're a whole person. So if you want some tips about diet, you know, they can maybe refer you on.
That sounds brilliant. And I guess my final question to you is, you're at university, you know, it must be difficult at times when there are so many activities going on, taking time out and just recognize you need that space to deal with your fatigue or deal with the symptom burden. So how do you do that? Because I'm just thinking of other young people at school, and if they are, if they've got an MPN, you know, how is it best to manage that in terms of functioning at school?
Yeah, that's a really important question, Nona. I think for me, it's been pacing myself and putting too much into a single day. So you might see a society if you're at university, an event that you really want to go to in the evening, not packing in a load of other activities, going to see friends or a lecturer over coffee, something like that. Just pacing yourself and knowing the thing I really want to do today is that evening event. And so kind of, as you say, taking time out to look after yourself. I would also say it's been really beneficial for disclosing an MPN to both the disability service at university and maybe at school as well. And so then the university is aware and are able to provide support for you, whether that be quieter accommodation, if you're noise sensitive, light sensitive, or whether it be at school, you know, being able to have regular snacks or water, just so the teachers are aware of why you might need that extra bit of support, or they can maybe timetable your lessons in a particular way to suit you. So I think being as open as you can with the institution is really beneficial and has been for me.
Alice, thank you so much. I'm sure this conversation will be a huge help to a lot of patients in our community. And I'd also like to, on behalf of MPN Voice, thank you also for your blog and everything you are doing for MPN Voice. Alice has a great plan, I have to tell you all, to have a cookbook. More to follow on the website when we get it, we get more news. But thank you, Alice. It's been a real pleasure having this conversation with you.
Thanks so much, Nona, likewise. And I really appreciate you all listening into my story and for also reaching out after you've read the blogs. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.